Welcome to the menu on Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy. Ooligan are a small fish that some Northwest tribes have strong cultural ties to, but they have all but disappeared in some places and are at least endangered in many others. We'll hear how some tribes are reviving their connections to ooligan, and we'll check in with Kickapoo chef Crystal Wapipa about her debut cookbook that draws from her Oakland home and her Oklahoma indigenous roots. That's all coming up on the menu right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Jill Freitas. New funding is supporting efforts to help fossil fuel-dependent communities in our region adapt to other forms of energy. One of the projects will focus on the Four Corners region, including the Navajo Nation and Hopi Tribe. The Mountain West News Bureau's Caleb Radel has more.
The work is part of an effort led by the nonprofit group Resources for the Future and partner universities. The Four Corners project is backed by about $70,000 and focuses on a Mountain West region long shaped by coal production and power plants, and lately, rising energy costs. Daniel Ramey helps lead the initiative. He says the focus isn't simply on replacing fossil fuel jobs.
It doesn't have to be solar or wind or geothermal or nuclear or anything else. There might be a great opportunity in aerospace, or there might be a great opportunity in some kind of medical sciences, or there might be a great opportunity in tourism.
He says it's about helping tribal communities build new economic paths on their own terms. For National Native News, I'm Caleb Radel.
The Trump administration has placed a 1-ton statue of controversial Italian explorer Christopher Columbus on White House grounds. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrorazio has more.
A national Italian-American coalition gifted it to President Trump. The towering 13-foot statue is actually a replica of one first presented by Ronald Reagan to the city of Baltimore. It was toppled by protesters in 2020, but never replaced. Italian-born Massimo Sommacampagna is part of the national group and president of the AZ Italian-American Chamber of Commerce. He says they celebrate Columbus Day as an American civic holiday.
Not necessarily the individual and the atrocities that he's been known for in the past.
Especially against Native Americans.
I mean, he bragged about abusing indigenous women in his diaries.
David Martinez is Akamal Afam and runs ASU's Institute for Transborder Indigenous Nations. He thinks erecting a statue of Columbus sends a strong message.
Then you're saying that all of the historical trauma that colonization inflicted on indigenous people was worth it.
Meanwhile, Phoenix and cities across the country are moving swiftly to erase markers of Cesar Chavez following allegations of rape and sexual abuse. Martinez believes Americans would feel differently about the Yuma-born labor rights icon if he came to prominence centuries prior.
If Chavez was 400 years ago, we'd probably be seeing a different reaction right now. More people would be inclined to preserve the historic symbolism of Chavez and ignore the criminal behavior.
Arizona lawmakers are looking to abolish a state holiday named after him. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrorazio.
Tribal leaders are raising concerns about potential federal cuts that could impact services across Indian country. The issue came up during a congressional hearing last week in Washington, D.C. on funding for tribal programs. During the hearing, Mark Maccaro, president of the National Congress of American Indians, says, quote, "Just this week, we learned that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is planning significant cuts to staff critical on administering programs," end quote. Leaders say those changes could delay funding and disrupt services tribal communities rely on. I'm Jill Freitas.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Attention tribal community leaders. The 2026 Tribal Self-Governance Conference takes place this April 7th at the Gila River Wild Horse Pass Resort and Casino in Chandler, Arizona. Full draft agenda and registration at tribalselfgov.org who support this show.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
Welcome to The Menu on Native America Calling, our regular feature on Indigenous food. I'm Andy Murphy. In the Pacific Northwest, tribes research and work to preserve a small, oily fish species called ooligan that used to be a major springtime staple. It's a culturally significant food and was a key part of an extensive trade network called the Grease Trails up and down the Pacific. Today, ooligan is a threatened species and runs are sporadic or gone altogether in some rivers. We'll visit with fishermen and researchers later in the hour. First, Kickapoo chef Crystal Wapipa joins us to talk about her debut cookbook, A Feather and a Fork. It documents the creative blend of indigenous flavors and ingredients that come together in her restaurant and in the city of Oakland, California. Join us by calling 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. And it's important to note that the publisher of A Feather and a Fork is a sponsor of Native America Calling, though that fact has no bearing on our editorial coverage decisions. So joining us now from Oakland, California is Crystal Wapipa. She's the chef and owner of Wapipa's Kitchen and, of course, the author of A Feather and a Fork, 125 intertribal dishes from an indigenous food warrior. She's a member of the Kickapoo tribe of Oklahoma. Welcome back to The Menu, Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Mm-hmm. In the book, you say that you grew up in a world of activism. Tell us about the community you come from and how you wove it into your cookbook here.
Well, growing up here in the Bay Area, we have over 80,000 different Native tribes. How I grew up is, I always call it kind of unique. I grew up in the world of activism as where the takeover of Alcatraz kind of had a lot to do with it. Where the takeover Alcatraz was in 1969, but then afterwards, my uncle, which is Bill Wapipa, he actually is one of the Indian Treaty Council and one of the founders of Aim for Freedom House, and that's where I lived with my sisters and my mother. And we would always attend different activism on Alcatraz where talked about Native housing, what's going on in the indigenous people's world, where it comes into land rights, mineral rights, water rights, you name it. They talked about it. And this is way back then in the 70s, I might add. And so I grew up where different people were coming from different reservations, and that's along the side of my mother. She didn't come here to the Bay Area until she was 12 years old, and we kind of just kind of grew up in that where human rights took place, number one, but then also community and how to embrace different people from different reservations.
Wow. And when did you notice that foods weren't part of these movements and all the activism work that was happening around you?
I noticed it when, at a very young age, I was pretty much around 7 years old. We would always go to Alcatraz for Thanksgiving. And when we would go to Alcatraz for Thanksgiving, and then afterwards we would go to La Pena, that is in Berkeley. And that's where you'll have like Russell Means, Dennis Banks, and of course my uncle, John Trudell, all of them would go there and speak about what's going on in the native country. But also at the same time, of course, I was hungry. It was Thanksgiving, and I remember looking at the food that was there, and I kind of put two and two together because we come from a traditional background where my grandmother would cook traditional foods in Oklahoma, but then I've never seen it so up close in front in the Bay. So I was very, I guess I can say I was very sharp at a young age, and I realized, hey, wait a minute, where's our food? And we would always get it going to Oklahoma, but we would never have it here in the Bay Area.
Mm. And in the book, you mentioned some of your aunties who you spent time with in the kitchen, and they helped inspire your love for food, and they helped, the rest of the community sort of, embrace more of their food in that urban setting there. Tell me how they did inspire your love for food, and how you talked about them in the book.
Yeah, they inspired me very much. We come from a family that cooks in community and for community. And at the same time, I can say my Aunt Teresa, she's mentioned in the book, where she always cooked with the community. It doesn't matter. Her door was always open and she would feed people. And when we would go to Oklahoma, we would always have like campouts and, of course, we would go to powwows and things like that, and we would always cook. And I always would be kind of gravitated to that because she would it was automatically something of who we are as people. What we do is cook in community and for community. And so I think a lot of that came from my Aunt Teresa, and along with my grandmother. My grandmother always cooked for the community and for people that you don't even know. And so I was raised that way. We always cooked and fed people.
All right. I love the one line you have in the beginning of the book. It says, "One aunt taught me how to forage, another how to feed an army with grace." Really talks about how you learned some valuable lessons early on that you benefited from with your first like catered event. I remember you telling me about this event a long time ago. And it was what, 400 people was your first ever like cooking event that you did?
Yes, it was 400 people.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and you've been doing that for, the catering, Wapipa's Kitchen for a while, and then it eventually morphed into a brick and mortar restaurant. And you started the Wapipa's Kitchen restaurant during the beginning of the pandemic. What was behind that decision to do that when at that time so many restaurants were closing?
Well, I felt like there was a need. I can't really explain it. There was something in my chest where at the time my commercial kitchen had closed down, and I was working with different Native American food producers to develop this wild rice bar. And so I end up providing this wild rice bar all over the Native country, all the way up into Canada. And I would get all these beautiful messages in my inbox and telling me how much they really needed that connection with the food, and thanking me. And so when my commercial kitchen officially gave us a 30-day notice, I was looking around for another commercial kitchen so I can provide these bars. And so a chef that I had knew here from the Bay Area said that she's actually going to move out, and did I want to take over this restaurant? And because I know you're looking for a kitchen, but at the same time, I kind of did the math and I felt like, you know what, either I'm going to do it or I'm not. And so I ended up doing it. And I felt like it was a huge, huge need for the community, just not in Oakland, but all over Native country, where I can inspire other people to open up these restaurants where people can have that connection with the food. And that's when I decided to open up Wapipa's Kitchen, just because I felt like, so there's something in my chest, in my heart, where I felt like this is something that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in the book, the restaurant, the art that is there, and all the pieces of representation that are on the walls and sitting on the shelves there, they really help you tell your part of your story in the cookbook here. We're going to go to break in about maybe a minute and a half here, but you include the Kickapoo language in throughout the book for the dishes and some ingredients. Tell me about what that work was like to include so much of the Kickapoo language.
Well, first it was an honor. I reached out to my elders for that to add the language into our book, and I have one of my aunts that is no longer here. She was our language keeper, and she taught Kickapoo language classes, and so she was the first one to help me to shape this book into the language, and she had left us, and then I end up picking it up with other people to help with the language. And I felt like it was very, very important. How can you have these beautiful recipes, and especially my story where I come from, and not have that language, because they go on hand together. And that is keeping the culture alive, but also telling a story of these beautiful recipes.
All right. What are one of your favorite recipes in the book?
I love the Three Sisters. It's in the front of the cover. I didn't know it was going to be at the front of the cover, but they chose it, and I was really excited and happy. My cousin Kathy shares this beautiful story about the Three Sisters, and it's the bean, corn, and squash, of course, and everybody has their own different stories on that, but this one, it really resonated with me. We talk about how the squash, and we talk about the beans and the corn, how they're grown together, but also how they thrive together, and how the squash and was really meant to feed our people, and how it saved our people. So I feel that when you have the beans, corn, and squash plants together, and it's still doing it till this day, and the resilience and the strength that it brings. And so I'm going to say that's one of my favorite recipes, but also I did it in a veggie bowl kind of type, where you can kind of spin it according to what season, but then also it's really simple, and you can really look at it, and it tells its story right there when you look at it.
Awesome. We'll be back with Chef Crystal Wapipa after this break.
At least 9 western states experienced the warmest winter on record, and predictions from climate experts say the trend is likely to extend into the summer. On top of that, reduced rainfall and snowpack increases the threat for severe drought across the West. We'll hear how tribes are preparing for a long, hot, dry spell. That's on the next Native America Calling.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
You are listening to The Menu on Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy, and we're talking with Kickapoo chef and food writer Crystal Wapipa about her cookbook, A Feather and a Fork. The book just came out, and you can join our conversation right now with your questions about Indigenous food. We're at 1-800-996-2848. That's 1-800-99-NATIVE. Crystal, just before the break, you were talking about the three sisters, and you have information in the cookbook about how they are traditionally grown together, why they're grown together, and like a kickapoo story that I thought was really sweet to add. I just read it just right before we came into the show here, but you have a lot of knowledge about agriculture and traditional seeds and traditional agriculture. Do you also farm along with all of the cooking and food advocacy work that you do?
I would love to say yes. I farm all the time, but my schedule is kind of busy. But at the same time, I'm very fortunate to actually partake in farming every year, and I think it's very important to me. Eventually, I like to go full time in farming, which is a whole nother thing. And I know hats off to all farmers out there and their knowledge and the land keepers on that part. But also, I love the connection personally. I love the connection to the land and also when you're planting and when you're harvesting. And I think that's very important that I was taught at a very young age through my grandfather.
Okay. And within the book, you highlight a couple of Oakland nonprofits, Native nonprofits, the Native American Health Center, the Intertribal Friendship House, the Cultural Conservancy, Sogorea Te Land Trust. Why was it important for you to include them in the book and also tell us how they connect with your culinary journey?
Well, it was very important for me to to have them in the book because they're the ones that supported me throughout my culinary journey, and they still support me till this day. And I think it's very important just to acknowledge the people that support you, but believes in your mission and believes in you what you're doing. So I felt like for me to add that in my culinary journey, because I take you guys on a food journey, it was very important to add them in there.
Okay. And what was the process like for you to, decide to ask author Tommy Orange to write the foreword for your cookbook here? He wrote a really nice foreword.
Yes. At the time when I was in the process of doing the book, it just came so naturally. I think I seen Tommy had came to the restaurant, and I just think I was. It just came so naturally for me to ask him, and he was very humble, and really wanted to do this. And I was very curious to see his take on it, since he's really a talented writer, and he pretty much hit the nail on the head when he did it. That's why he's in the forward on that part. But then also, I knew he can identify where I come from, of us, both of us living here in Oakland in the Bay Area and growing up in the Native community. So, yeah, I was very humbled and honored that he wrote my forward for my book.
All right. And you mentioned the cookbook tells your story, tells your food journey. And for folks who may be new to, reading a cookbook and going through a cookbook, how do these recipes tell readers about you? How do they tell your story? And what was the process like for you to bring this many recipes out for this book?
It was I wanted to go, since this is my first book, I really wanted to go as natural as possible and to be authentic as possible. And I think it's very important for me being an indigenous chef and to also tell where it comes into indigenous chefs. People, we don't really get to tell our story. You just see us cooking, but we all have different stories. And I wanted to take people on this journey, and also for the future generation, take them on a journey where this is, it came really natural. for me. And I was really fortunate that people really believed in my story for me to tell. And I wanted to start off from the very beginning and I wanted to end at the very end. What I do is a daily basis as an Indigenous chef, but then also all these beautiful opportunities that I have been giving as a chef, and how we do come from, how we feed our community first. And so I think that was very important for me to share my story and where I come from as a chef, and as what we do in the community, how we feed people. And that's how a lot of chefs really begin. We begin feeding the community first. And I think that's very, very important. I don't want it to lose track of that.
Yeah, and the title of your book, you include intertribal dishes. And that really points to also you're growing up in an urban area in Oakland, California. Talk a little bit more about like the intertribalness of your food experience here.
Yeah, I've been really, really fortunate to grow up with many different tribes, especially here in the urban area, but mainly at the Intertribal Friendship House, where till this day, since 1955, they feed people in the community. And sometimes you'll have blue corn, sometimes you'll have dried corn, or you'll have hominy. And I've been really fortunate to grow up around all these different tribes, and how they embrace their foods, and been really honored. When I think about how I grew up, we had all these different foods because it was a hub where different people from different reservations or different tribes would come to eat till this day. And they would feed the community on free on Wednesdays, but now it's free on Thursdays, and they still do it till this day. And so I really, when I get visitors, I really try to bring them to the Intertribal Friendship House, and where they can really see who I am and where I come from, and how we still to this day embrace different intertribal foods.
All right. Crystal, is there I know a lot of the foods in the book are foods that you've had at your restaurant. Is there a dish right now that I could cook that is also on the menu right now at People's Kitchen?
Oh, yes. You can definitely do the sweet potato tostada, and you can add any toppings that you want. This recipe really comes from, I talk about how I grew up a tiny bit over in Hoopa, California, and we would always have tortillas and potatoes and seaweed. And so when I was developing this recipe for the restaurant, it's really, all natives, we love potatoes and tortillas, but it's really with the seaweed that's in it. But instead, I did it open face, but it looks like a tostada, so we call it a sweet potato tostada. I really encourage a lot of people to do that, because sometimes we add smoked salmon, sometimes we add bison. You can add anything you want on top of it, and it's really fulfilling when you see it. It doesn't look like it, but it really is.
All right. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for joining us today on The Menu. And I just want to remind readers again that the publisher of A Feather and a Fork is a sponsor of Native America Calling, but that fact has no bearing on how we cover the book today. So I'd like to move on to the second topic of today's episode of The Menu, ooligan. It's a small fish that's also called ooligan or smelt. Once plentiful, it was a much used staple appearing at the end of winter to bring in a new year. But today, ooligan runs have diminished or even disappeared in some rivers in the Pacific Northwest. You can join this portion of our discussion by calling 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. And if your tribe is located along the Ooligan Grease Trails, give us a call. Join our conversation. Joining us now from Metlakatla, Alaska is Cindy and Louie Wagner. They are fishermen and members of the Southeast Alaska Indigenous Transboundary Commission. Cindy is Tsimshian and Haida. Welcome to The Menu, Cindy.
Thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and Louie is Tsimshian and Tlingit. Welcome to the menu, Louie.
Thank you very much.
All right, Louie, I want to start with you. How was the ooligan run this year?
They came in, but not real strong, and I'm feeling that there'll be more coming in, but I wasn't able to get up on the river this year. My wife and I had to go up for me to Anchorage to the Native Hospital up there, and so we missed out on going up to the river.
All right. Cindy, what did the ooligan run look like for you on the river?
We had a couple people tell us that it was a slow start, but it built up and it was a pretty good run. And there's still snow and ice around, so and a few people got ooligan, but and we did get a couple bags from our friends that did harvest up there, so we just have to make it last for the year.
Yeah. Is it enough to make oil or ooligan grease?
Oh, no. That takes quite a bit. And, if you want quite a bit because it's such an arduous task. Takes a long time, and you just want to make it worth your while.
Right. Tell me a little bit about that process to render these fish into oil or grease.
We catch it, and we put it in totes. And I'm sure in the old days it went into a pit lined with cedar boughs. But nowadays it goes into a tote and be allowed to drain until all the blood and fluid is gone, and then it's put into a vat where it's stirred and stirred and stirred with underneath, over a fire with the wood that we have to keep going, and cautious that we don't get it too hot because we don't want it to burn. And it could take, from the catch to the jar would probably take 2.5, maybe 3 weeks of just mostly waiting. And then it comes up. When it comes up, it's just, probably not to anyone else, but to us, it's a beautiful sight when the grease finally floats up to the top and all the fluid and the water and the fish skeletons and everything else, scales, go to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And we bail it off and filter it and make sure it's nice and clean and jar it, and it's ready to be sold or eaten. All right. And it's eaten as a condiment, like over boiled potatoes and in our fish soups, halibut and salmon kajumps, we call it, and potatoes, I said that, and our smoked fish. Right. It's a delicious condiment.
Yeah, if it supported a whole economy and supported the whole grease economy on the grease trails, it has to be delicious, and it's also considered medicinal. Is that right?
That's right. You could talk to my husband about what his Auntie Mary, if she even heard a sniffle, she'd douse them with ooligan grease.
Yeah. I want to go back to Louie then. Louie, how did your family use ooligan grease?
Just like what Cindy said, for any smoked fish or boiled halibut or salmon, which we call kajumps, we dip our cockles in it to eat, and our gaiwaks, which is Tsimshian for dried salmon, and dried halibut. We use it like a spoon to eat the grease. And just pretty much everything. It's been a big staple, and like Cindy was saying there, my dad would be out in the Gulf of Alaska fishing for halibut or blackcod, and my Auntie Mary would stay home and take care of us kids. And boy, it felt like I was catching a cold or something. She'd take a whole tablespoon of cold ooligan grease right out of the fridge, and I'd have to take it. So when I did that, I learned not to get sick again. I kept my hat on.
All right. Tell me about how plentiful were ooligan, 3, 4, 5 decades ago. Louis?
Very plentiful. Up to the mid-late 90s, they were just like clockwork. Even then, you could miss them. It just always depended on the fish. And we have to go 100 miles up to the river and 100 miles back home, so we always try to pay really close attention, and so we don't waste fuel or have to run out of groceries and come home. But usually we'd set crab pots and stuff to eat anyway. But holy smokes, it's a long ways up to our river, and the weather isn't nice. There's no safe harbor up there. We had a special place in the river where we could go up at high tide and put our boats and tie to the bluff in the river there, and there'd be the pothole under there, and we still keep a log up there yet that my family always used to use, and it's just.
We're going to go to a break right now, but we're going to continue talking with Cindy and Louis Wagner about ooligan in Southeast Alaska. I'm also going to bring in another guest from British Columbia in Canada to also talk about ooligan at the Newhalk Nation. We'll be back after this break.
Support by the Gathering of Nations Powwow. The last dance is this April 24th and 25th at Expo, New Mexico. See the outgoing of current Miss Indian World, Dania Wawasuk, Saturday, April 25th. Tickets at gatheringofnations.com and at the gates.
Kaufman & Associates has over 35 years of experience serving Indian country, supporting growth, transformation, and sustainability of tribal programs. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
You are listening to The Menu on Native America Calling, our regular feature on Indigenous food sovereignty. I'm Andy Murphy. We're focusing on ooligan today. The small, oily fish is a godsend to tribes and wildlife after the long winter months in the Pacific Northwest. But over time, ooligan populations have declined because of multiple man-made factors, and ooligan runs are threatened today. What do you know about ooligan? Is there a similar staple in your community? Give us a call at 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. I want to bring back Cindy and Louis Wagner today. They are fishermen in Metlakatla, Alaska, and members of the Southeast Alaska Indigenous Transboundary Commission. Cindy, what are some of the reasons ooligan has disappeared from you guys' area in Metlakatla?
We wondered that also, and I think we were moose hunting on the river, and running up the river to hunt, and I asked my husband, Louis, why there were oil drums and plastic and like tarps and buckets and stuff way up in the woods along the river. And I said, how would they get there? And we had no idea that there was the beginning of a mine going on at the head of the headwaters of the Unic River. And we noticed after that, that it was a little bit less and a little bit less of ooligan each season. We also noticed that the salmon, the Unic River is all five species of salmon go up to that river to spawn, and we noticed right away that there were no king salmon or no humpies or sockeye or coho or dogs, spawned out in the river. Mm. And when they didn't die in the river, the bears didn't come down to feed them. So we knew something pretty major was happening above us, and it wasn't for maybe 4 or 5 years later that we heard there was a mine going on up there, and ooligan need nice clean water.
Okay. And that's something, mining is something the Southeast Alaska Indigenous Transboundary Commission focuses on?
Yes. Right now they're trying to get the Canadian government to recognize us and let us have a say in their decisions on allowing mines.
Right. Okay. I'm going to go back to Louis here. Louis, how important are ooligan to the culture there, and how does the lack of ooligan today affect how you pass on those traditions?
Well, right now, it's still very important, but we're not being allowed to pass it on, and they allow us one bucket, and they're trying to monitor it, manage the fishery, and they're not there long enough, the Forest Service, and you have to be there. I've spent my whole life up there, 64 years in there, give or take, and holy smokes, and I sit up there through a lot of weather, freezing, snow, storms, southeast storms, but it's very important to our community here in Metlakatla, Alaska, where we're the only reservation in Alaska. And at the time when we were bringing ooligan home, everyone had a smokehouse back at the time. And the Army put an airport in out on the southern part of Annette Island here. And the Ellis Airlines would fly passengers over and back from the airport, and this reporter was on the plane this one time, and he said, "Holy smokes!" He was in the plane, and what is going on? And Metlakatla is up in smoke, and somebody told him, "Oh, the oligans are in. The smokehouses are all going." I'll never forget that. That was in the 60s when he said that. He was a reporter for, I forget now. Certain to forget too much.
All right. Well, at least your memories of, buckets and buckets and, maybe tons of ooligan coming into the river and having all the smokehouses around. I'm glad you still have those memories with you. Very precious during this time when ooligan are not seen very much and are regulated because they are a threatened species here in Alaska. But I want to see what is going on over in British Columbia. We have another guest I want to bring in from Bella Coola in British Columbia, Canada. We have Jason Moody. He's the New Hulk Fisheries and Wildlife Planning Coordinator and the owner of Nan Adventure Tours. He's New Hulk. Welcome to the menu, Jason.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Yeah, of course. I want to ask you, how are ooligan a part of Newhalt culture and origin stories?
It's a deep history. Newhalt are intertwined with ooligan and salmon, so both considered an ooligan and a salmon people. We have stories that go back thousands of years with them. And we recently had an amazing ceremony held right on our river. And it's called the Sput ceremony, where we have a pole dedicated to the ooligan. And the pole ceremony dances, our hereditary chiefs honor the return of the ooligan. And this ceremonial pole actually gets new regalia, cedar regalia, each year during the ceremony. So it's quite amazing part of our culture.
Awesome. And that's a totem pole that was put up in the community you're talking about. And ooligan were also part of the traditional economy there. I think I mentioned grease trails a couple of times this hour. Tell me about that traditional economy.
Yeah, it's something that's based without money or currency. Barter and trade. Newhalt ooligan grease was prized. All kinds of amazing properties, anti-cancer properties that when you do get grease, you kind of glow. That's kind of some of the stories is your skin becomes kind of a bronze tan. The nutrients in your body is just amazing. And so obviously throughout this part of Turtle Island, leading all the way across, there are grease trails. And a lot of our ancient village sites have stones and artifacts from all across the island, and remnants of ooligan grease being brought to all different communities along the way.
All right. And when did ooligan start to disappear from the river there in Bella Coola?
I guess we started to really notice declines throughout the 90s, and those were our grease makers. And of course, there would have been some decline because of climate change and other, things happening in the freshwater systems. But what we found through background work, as well as in-depth studies on looking at coast-wide data, it coincided with the shrimp trawl fishery, which at that time had been opened up through the Canadian government, new boats, new licenses. And so a lot of overfishing and ooligan were just considered bycatch, so hundreds of tons off of boats, and multi-years within the age groups for our fish. So by 1999, it was a sharp decline because of that. So our research pointed directly at that industry.
Okay. Were there also years where there were no ooligan runs?
Yeah, interesting, because there would be different parts of our territory that would have ooligan, and maybe this particular part of Newhalt territory in the Bella Coola River didn't, or maybe just small amounts. Like you'd really have to do some in-depth work to see if they're there. You might not see them, but they're actually there in smaller amounts. But our people would travel to other rivers. There's several other rivers in our territory, and we'd be able to check them and see and come home with ooligan as well. So it was up and down. And obviously, things that that affect salmon affect ooligan. They're traveling through the same water. They're suffering through the same conditions as well. So we study both, and we've seen some reassuring results over the last few years.
Right. You were featured in a film called Ceremony by filmmaker Banshee Hanus, who's also from the Newhalk Nation, and she filmed you and your sister Megan Moody in the river doing some studying and research along the river, and she filmed you guys spotting the first ooligan, and the first ooligan to return after some years. Tell us what that experience was like for you to see ooligan in parts of these rivers that they haven't been seen for a while.
Yeah, that's amazing work done by Banshee, and I've got to hold my hands up to her. It's been a lot of footage that's been taken over the years, and she did focus on our ooligan study, which has been in operation since 2001, and we actually could find their eggs and some of their larvae coming out. But it wasn't until about 2013 that we started to see small schools of ooligan, maybe 100 here, 100 there. And then 2018, another bump. But 2024, I think, is what we're focusing on here. And that's where we saw the largest increase since we've been studying them for over 25 years. And it was reassuring, and it felt really good to know that they are recovering. And to capture that in such an amazing way is what we need, really. We need this showcased on a large level so that people understand the importance of these fish, how it affects our people when it comes to food security. With those nutrients back in our diet, it would be phenomenal for our people, for our youth to really experience that as well has been amazing.
All right. And what has this, return of some ooligan meant for the work that you and the tribe are doing to bring back ooligan?
Well, it's something that you want to bring to your people. So we do community feasts, presentations, updates to everybody, and to be able to come to them and say, we're showing these results and it's looking good, or better. When you look back in earlier data, our ooligan were in the 100 ton to 150 ton, and our research is showing, maybe a ton or two. So we're at like 1 or 2%, but it does look like something out there, which is reassuring. Like people can actually see the ooligan, and as little as that might seem, it's still, it's like a small flame that's ignited all the animals. You start to see the seagulls, the seals, porpoise, dolphin, otters. Everything wants to have some ooligan, including us. So when your research is showing that they are recovering, and I think a lot of this has to do with overfishing, and it's coast-wide. There were certain closures on this coast over the last several years, specifically PSSI closures, and we saw instant results from that. When it came to sockeye, we have a sockeye recovery program as well. We saw instant results with that. And then we started to see ooligan come back into areas we hadn't seen them, in numbers we hadn't seen them. So if we protect them out there doing this research, we work on our river and we protect them here and we're diligent, we do our ceremonies.
All right.
Anything's possible.
Got it. All right. Well, that is the end of our hour here, and I'd like to say thank you to our guests who joined us. We had Krista Wapipa, Jason Moody, and Cindy and Louie Wagner. Thank you so much for listening to The Menu on Native America Calling. I'm Andy Murphy.
Faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that?
Fully give grace.
That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, share progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate feelings.
Attention tribal community leaders. The 2026 Tribal Self-Governance Conference takes place this April 7th to the 9th at the Gila River Wild Horse Pass Resort and Casino in Chandler, Arizona. Tribal delegation meetings using AI, Indian Health 101, land stewardship, tribal values-based communications training, understanding the tribal-federal relationship, and more, all at one convening. The full draft agenda and registration are available at tribalselfgov.org, who support this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Cookbook Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.